a child, we always laughed. My father always looked on the bright side of life, and always has his whole life.
The fact that every single day of his life, he tries to make a difference in the life of someone else.
A very intense man, but terribly humble, very fair person.
We get along well. We don't agree on much.
I realized how passionate he was about retailing.
What legacy would you like to leave behind? A legacy of you can start it on your own.
One of Africa's wealthiest men, Raymond Ackerman, founder of the iconic retail group Pick n Pay, made it to 27th place on the Forbes Africa list of Africa's 40 richest people in December 2012. Currently, the group consists of over 1,000 stores, mainly in South and Southern Africa. In 2011, at the age of 80, Raymond Ackerman won the All Africa Business Leaders Lifetime Achievement Award. There have been many more awards, including the Honorary Doctorate in Commerce, awarded to him in 2009 by the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Late in 2012, he had hip replacement surgery, but recovered soon to be back where he loves to be, involved with Pick n Pay and its various foundations. Over the next hour, Raymond Ackerman and the Ackerman family speak about the early days and the making of this remarkable man, the business philosophies that helped him build Pick n Pay, his myriad fights on behalf of the consumer and human rights, and the legacy he continues to build with the help of his wife and children. Defining moments ranged from early childhood experiences to that fateful day in 1966 when he was fired from his leadership position at Checkers. But let's start at the beginning. Raymond was only 7 years old when he had to testify in court in his parents' divorce. Primed by lawyers, he shouted that he wanted to stay with his father, something that would haunt him in later years.
My father was fighting for custody because he felt that was the best thing for the three, my brother, my sister, and myself. So that really has stayed with me all my life. I can just picture the lawyers talking to me when I was 7 years old and having to stand up in court. But we got over that, but it also made me realize how important one's life was and marriage for the future. And I think it certainly has helped me in understanding the importance of our own lives. But I know that it turned out right, my father looking after the three of us, which was a very unusual case for a father to get custody.
But, in 1941.
1941.
Yeah, it was a first case where the father won the custody of the children. But years later, we became very close with Raymond's mother.
Gustav Ackerman decided to send his boys to the prestigious Bishop's Diocesan College in Cape Town.
Oh, the schooling was wonderful. It is really one of the best schools in the country, and my father recognized this. And being Jewish boys, it was a very strange thing to go to Bishop's at that time. They're much more open now. But I remember my father calling us in, my brother and I, and saying, if you know who you are, I want to send you to the best school. You're going to have troubles, it's going to be difficult for you. It wasn't so difficult, except for one or two instances, but I had a wonderful time there. I enjoyed it there, and I learnt a lot, but I also learnt to be on my own, to stand up for myself, because being Jewish in a very Christian society at that time, it wasn't an easy time for me to be at school, and it taught me to very much fight for myself. So my early days had a big influence on my life.
As a keen rugby player at Bishop's, Raymond felt devastated when he was not selected for the team for a tour to Zimbabwe.
I was playing fullback, and I went to see the coach, and I said, if I'm no good, I understand, but you've never dropped me from under 15. And it's the most wonderful thing to go on a tour. So he said, I can't take a Jewish boy to the Christian schools in Zimbabwe. And I can't tell you what this did to me. It made me very conscious of South Africa's problems and the apartheid and black-white, and being Jewish or Christian, and
Discrimination generally.
yeah, and it's sort of echoed right through our lives, it's sort of the fight against discrimination. So those two events probably affected me most.
This incident contributed to Raymond Ackerman's continued fight against discrimination, especially during the apartheid years. But more about that later. It was at the University of Cape Town that he encountered two people who would play crucial roles in his life. First, there was his economics professor, Professor William Harold Hutt.
It was the most wonderful thing. The very first day, 40 of us arriving bright and fresh for university, and the professor of commerce said, I know why you guys are here. Do you want to make money quickly? Put your hands up if that's the reason you're here, to take a commerce course. Nearly everyone put their hand up. He said, I'm going to fail you all in 3 years' time if you think that's the way to be a successful businessman. He said, a doctor has to look after his patient and a lawyer his client. And the more he looks after his patient or his client, the more successful he becomes. Goes out on weekends to look after a sick person and so on. If you don't realize that that is how to be successful in business, and those of you who want to make money quickly, you're going to lose it even faster than you make it. And that changed my whole thinking, that a retailer must look after his customer first, and the profits will flow the more you care for your customer. And when I came to my father, he said, Raymond, I'm going to pull you out of university. It's all theory. He's a long-haired professor, and he doesn't really understand life. But my father was wrong. My father was a very good businessman, but my father felt this guy was wrong. And this chap influenced my whole reason to be. And I suddenly got an interest in going into a business world where, as before, I wasn't sure, like most young people, what I really wanted to do.
It was also at the University of Cape Town where he met Wendy Marcus, a girl 5 years his junior, who would become his wife.
On my first day at university, before I registered, there was a table up which said night school. And I went to find out what night school was all about, and it was to help illiterate people in the townships who hadn't had proper education. So I immediately registered before I registered as a university student. And then Raymond was running a chain of schools in those days. He was always into chains.
I was a good few years older than Wendy. I was working, but still involved with the night schools. I was running about 5 night schools. And because I was the chairman of the whole thing, I had to look at the names of the teachers who were coming on different nights, Monday night or Tuesday night. And I saw I liked the name Wendy, and I said to the lady helping me, put Wendy on my night. She was so polite to me, Mr. Ackerman, what class shall I teach tonight? And she's never called me Mr. Ackerman or anything like that since. But that's how we met, right in the heart of Windermere.
My parents' love story, they are unbelievable. 56 years of marriage on the 4th of September. I mean, they got married very young. My mother she hates me telling people how old I am, because then people know how old she is, so I won't do that, Mum. She was married at 1920, this beautiful slip of a girl. My dad was this young 25-year-old man. You think of yourself at those ages. She had me at 22, and my brother, I think, at 20. There's 2 years between us. So we've always had very young parents, and that our children have these young grandparents. It's fantastic. They're young at heart.
After university in 1951, Raymond joined the Ackermans division of the Greatermans Group. Ackermans had been founded by his father Gustav after the First World War, but was sold to Greatermans in 1940. Soon, Greatermans started Checkers, and not long afterwards, Raymond was put in charge.
I worked in different stores, in Ackermans first and then Greatermans. And then they said, Raymond, you come to Checkers because you've had a cash training at Ackermans, which was a cash business. And it was a crucial change for me because I knew nothing about food, but neither did they. They were a clothing chain. They then, after a big fight with me to try and get more experience, I said, please, can't I go overseas to a special conference on supermarkets? After a big battle, they said yes, because Checkers had just started, wasn't doing too well, and we just got married about a year before. We just had Gareth, my oldest, who's running Pick n Pay today. And I said, Wendy, I've got to do this. And she said, I've got to do it too with you.
We sent our new baby to my mother to look after. Needless to say, severely criticised by everybody. We discussed it obviously very deeply, and I reasoned, I'm 20 years older than my son. When I'm 40, I've still got my life ahead of me. My son will be away, he'll be gone. He'll be at university and starting his own career. And then what will I have? I married Raymond to be with him, so we're going to go and study together.
But it was the most amazing thing, because she then went right through with me at this conference, and then we worked in supermarkets in America, which we were introduced to. I was in the deli counter, she was in the cheese counter, but we worked solidly for about 6 months in all.
It wasn't 6 months, it was 5 months.
5 months.
I was a bad enough mother as it was.
But the fact was, when I came back, the board said, no, you're too young and your ideas are all wrong. And I said, but please give me a chance. And they gave me a chance to take one store, and I revolutionized this one store.
In 1965, he was named Junior Chamber of Commerce Outstanding Young Man of the Year. Gary Player was one of the 3 other candidates. By the age of 35 in 1966, he was managing 85 Checkers stores. And then the bomb dropped and his life changed irrevocably.
To make a long story short, I was called in on a Monday morning. They said, you've been too difficult. You're always fighting the board to get this and that for your new group. And you've now got 89 stores, and we will absolutely change the whole scene in South Africa. And you're out. 2 weeks salary. Wendy was having our 4th child, John. It was the most crazy thing to have happened. And if I'd done something wrong, had stolen or done something dishonest, I could understand. They said, you're just too difficult. I said, if I hadn't been difficult, you wouldn't have the Checkers group. I was fired on that day, just coldly fired. Wendy was expecting Jonathan. She'd been very ill for 7 months, and I didn't know how to go home and tell her.
I think to start a business together, work side by side, offices right next door to each other for over 46 years, I think it's fantastic to have a partnership and a marriage like that, and to build an incredible business and legacy. I would love to do that one day.
After the break, the founding of Pick n Pay and the business principles and philosophy that turned it into a retail giant. When the wheels came off in 1966, Raymond Ackerman was a salaried man with a seemingly bright future in the corporate world, 3 children and a 4th on the way. One of the options open to him was to become an entrepreneur.
It was amazing. My brother-in-law in Cape Town said, Raymond, come back to Cape Town. I said, how can I? We've got our life up in Joburg. And he phoned me a week later and said, I've got a business the guy wants to sell. He's got 3 little stores called Pick n Pay, and he wants to sell. Come down. It wasn't quite as easy as I'm saying, because it's a long story, but I came down on a Tuesday, and by Tuesday night, I'd bought this business. With no money, I had no capital, I just had my salary from Greatermans. This guy wanted 600,000 Rand, 620,000 Rand, and I had 0 capital. He had 3 days to get the money. And the idea was to get about 40 or 50 shareholders to join me. But for me to have the control afterwards, it was quite a tricky thing to do. And this guy organized it all, and a friend in Joburg got 20 people. 25
in Joburg and 25 in Cape Town.
And we had the money by Friday, and we bought Pick n Pay.
He's always said it's 10% capital, 90% guts. And feet on the ground, head in the skies, dream. Just keep your dreams, but keep your feet on the ground.
Too many people are scared to open their own businesses because of lack of capital. It's understandable, but you should never worry about that. If you've got the right idea and the right concept or the right mousetrap, you'll always find ways of getting the capital, either through friends, family, or today there are many companies helping businesses get capital. 90% guts, 10% capital.
The Ackermans took with them into their new business the lessons they learned from Bernard Trujillo during their trip to the United States.
He taught me the 4 legs of a table. You run any business, it's 4 legs of a table, with the consumer sitting on the top, that everything must be geared for the consumer. And it's so linked with what Hutter taught me, the professor, that I had a philosophy that I just knew was right. And we built Pick and Pay basically on 4 legs of a table.
I think it works. The philosophy is that you've got the consumer sits on the table and you've got the 4 legs of the table. It's a very good business model around which to run a business. And we use it, and we use it extensively in the business.
Why not listen to your customer? It makes the most common sense. And that's the amazing thing about my dad. He has got such common sense for certain things. Other things he's not brilliant at, but he's got such common intuition. And follow your intuition. Listen to the customer. You're there to answer her needs at every beck and call.
The real focus must be always on the consumer and do what is right for the consumer, because if you look after them, the consumer then looks after you, which is the fundamental ethos.
So it's not striving for profits first, but...
No, it's always do what is right. And a lot of the reinvestment we're doing in Pick and Pay at the moment is not to create profit right now, but it's to make sure that the business is properly structured so we can bring lower prices to our consumers at the end.
Profits are like your bloodstream. You need them to grow, to build, to pay salaries, bonuses, expand. But it shouldn't be your be-all. Your be-all should be your consumer or your patient if you're a doctor. And I think therein lies what I hope is a legacy that other businesses will follow and do more of, because we need a lot of that in this country.
The dominant Ackerman and Pick and Pay philosophy of listening to the consumer had its genesis early in Raymond's life when he took seriously what Professor Hutt and Bernard Trujillo had to say.
And the secret, if I may say, for a lot of young people is they tend not to listen to older people. If I hadn't listened to these two guys and felt, wow, what they're saying is right, I wouldn't be here today.
Generally, people don't listen. That's whether you're younger or older, people don't listen. And I think that was the secret. One of the secrets of Raymond's success is he's never been arrogant or I know better. I'll never forget Trujillo gave us a list of 10 points which stymie growth. We always kept that, and when young people came with ideas, we would say, that's an interesting idea, let's try it. Not, we've tried it and it didn't work. Maybe we tried it and it didn't work, but it wasn't the right time. And we were too early or something. Very often our ideas were far too early. We tried them again and then they worked.
I said at the beginning it was Hutt and Bernardo who influenced my whole life. I can't tell you how important that was for me when I lost my job in Greatermans. I nearly joined another company, because I was scared. I had a wife and 4 kids. And I remembered his 90% guts, 10% capital. And if you have the right mission and a young person who says, I can find a better way of doing something, and really is passionate about it, there'll always be people who can supply the funds. And that's a very important concept for young people in Africa for the future.
Taking that big step to become an entrepreneur takes a lot of guts. But is guts all you need? Can anyone be an entrepreneur?
Somebody who take risks. One could have a whole debate about being an entrepreneur. I wouldn't say everybody, but if a person's got passion and drive, and passion to do something for someone else, not just to make money, but a passion to make a better coat, or to make a better carpet, or better glass, and they're passionate about it. It's amazing. I found at my academy at UCT, there's a young guy. He now has about 15 cyclists going around every day collecting medicines for people who can't queue up to get their medicines from the hospital. He says, go to work, give me your prescription, and I will queue for you to get your medicines. And he's doing so well. He's helping people to have a freedom to go to their work, and they'll get their medicines because he's doing it for them, and he's making a great success. I could tell you dozens of stories of people who've got that passion, and they've found the money.
And a good idea.
The passion of the good idea, yeah.
Yes, and follow it through. And also a lack of arrogance. Arrogance and entitlement are 2 diseases that we have in this country, and you'll get nowhere if you feel you're entitled to. There's no shortcut. I think has come through with what Raymond has said. There's no shortcut to hard work and passion and enthusiasm and drive. There's no shortcut, but the rewards are great.
No shortcuts also means always making time for people. Besides being the right thing to do, it pays back in the end.
If you just look life as an optimist, he will never look at the negative side of anything. Basic philosophies like you cannot go to sleep on an argument. Answer every phone call before the close of day. These are common courtesies that all contribute to making a successful business. Sound values like listen to the customer. The customer will always guide you as to what the next step is going to be. I mean, he's not a rocket scientist, he's a retailer. He's the consumer, the housewife's friend, and he has built her respect.
If I hadn't let Jack Golden, who started Pick n Pay in Cape Town, he said, can I come and look at your Checkers stores in Johannesburg when I was running Checkers? And I said, sure, I don't know you, Jack, but come up and I'll meet you at the airport and I'll take you around. He couldn't believe it because he was a little guy in Cape Town and I was running 89 stores in Joburg. And it was because of that day when I said, Jack, I'll meet you at the airport and take you around. When he wanted to sell Pick n Pay, he only wanted to sell to me when I lost my job. So my whole life changed by doing something which, if I may say, most people would have been too busy to do. My secretary said, you can't, Mr. Ackerman, you've got meetings all day. I said, I'm going to take this guy around. And I got Pick n Pay as a result of that.
Some 17 years later, another young woman became his PA, and she is still there, a sounding board and support, as is only fitting.
I joined Mr. Ackerman April the 1st, 1983, which is synonymous with April Fool's Day, I always say. So nearly 30 years I've worked for him. He's intense, a very intense man, but terribly humble, very fair person. And he is a people's person. He will tell you that himself, but I second it. He really is.
He's a great networker. Probably doesn't like using that word, but he'll talk to anybody, have a cup of tea with everybody, say, why don't you meet this one, and get 10 other people to give you 100 Rand, and then you've got much better capital to grow on. And it's always sound advice.
Wise, very clever in as much as he's very wise and interesting, and he's wonderful guy.
I think my father's always been there as the mentor and a little bit of the business icon, and to show how business have run, given advice and guidance around how to run business, but very much from his perspective.
He may have a gentle and friendly demeanor, but to have reached the pinnacle he strides on now, he must be tough at the negotiation table.
When you need something negotiated, you call my dad in, because he's a hard negotiator and he will get the best deal. We also now, when we're dealing with possible partners in our School of Entrepreneurship, pull in my dad to come and do the final deal.
A lot of people say that they would hate to be on the other side of the negotiating table with Raymond Ackerman. I think as children, particularly girls, my sister and I, we never had those kind of issues like, oh, Dad says you can't do this, you can't do that. I think it was wonderful growing up as a child because he's got a fantastic sense of humor. He always has fun. I think inside he's a child as well. But as a negotiator, this man will not give up.
After the break, Raymond Ackerman's determination as a negotiator comes in handy when he squares up to fight monopolies and the apartheid government.